and welcome to this webinar. Today, our focus will be an action that is usually forgotten when students and professionals write a paper: organizing their ideas before writing. Some people think of it as a waste of time, a claim that is always proven wrong because the lack of preparation causes that they have to rewrite many parts of their text. When weaknesses are found, or ever worse, they submit the papers and the feedback is much less encouraging than what they expected. Our motto in this topic is prepare yourself and you will be successful. So let's see why. Today we are going to talk about organizing. And even though you may think it is clear what it means, it may be useful to take some seconds to clarify what seems to be obvious and perhaps is not. The quote points out the true nature and importance of organizing, something that you do before acting to avoid confusion. We may be used to act without planning and make all decisions when actually doing the process. We work reactively instead of proactively. Therefore, we lose possibilities of choosing the most appropriate things and make informed decisions. This is what we need to avoid when writing academic text. So, embrace the organizing process as something pleasant, purposeful, planned, progressive, and personalized. Welcome, Kakali and Crystal. And this is our agenda for today. Our focus is twofold. First, to know a little more of what writing means in relation to cognitive demands, and second, to know how you can organize your ideas to develop academic texts that are coherent, consistent, and effective, the kind of product your thesis or dissertation is expected to be. So, our first goal today is to learn about the kind of cognitive task that writing is, because you cannot fully master what you don't know. It is possible that you feel overwhelmed by the explanation I will present. Please open your mind to understand how it functions when you write a text, especially an academic one. It's something you tend to do without conscious thinking and reflection, and although you do it rather successfully, it is also true that you can get a lot of benefits by improving it. Therefore, I invite you to concentrate on how mind tends to perform writing, and later on reflect on how your own mind tends to do it. Now, we are going to see why academic writing is essentially a case of problem solving, which, as a matter of fact, is one of the skills employers look for when they recruit new employees today. So, improving academic writing means improving your problem-solving skill, a highly demanded skill these days. Let's begin by demystifying what academic writing is. At first, and perhaps second sight too, academic writing seems to be something mysterious and consequently unreachable. Why? Basically, because most of you have not had formal and continuous training on it. By the way, I'm using the word training not because I think it is a type of conditioning, but because it reflects that the set of skills that academic writing comprises has to be practiced, though not in absence of reflective thinking and questioning. Going back to the demystification of academic writing, I should say that is in fact complex, but is also made of components that can be learned and internalized, and therefore you can master academic writing. So it is complex, but attainable. But what is involved in writing? To illustrate this point, let's use the model of Flower and Hayes about their theory of writing as a cognitive process. My intention is to help you visualize the cognitive process and environment involved in the task of writing, because I believe that to perform high-order thinking tasks like academic writing, directions to follow are not enough. You need to understand at least the basic nature of those tasks so as to find ways of being creative when doing them. Recipes to follow are not a good answer to be successful when writing academically. Therefore, let's have a deeper look into the model. As you can infer from the model, there are three main elements involved in writing: the task environment, the writer's long-term memory, and the writing processes. Therefore, writers have ideas and experiences to communicate in written form, but they have to create text that are governed by constraints and conventions, something that is a main characteristic of academic writing. To do that, they have not only to be aware of those two elements, but also to perform some writing processes to assure the valid and appropriate expression of their ideas within the existing constraints and conventions. The flow of the arrows in the model shows that writing is not a linear process, but basically one in which input and output roles interchange constantly. So writing is conceived as a process of generating and editing text within a set of constraints, and that makes it a problem-solving task, one that usually requires to alter previous decision in order to solve the problem in a more effective way. A task that can deal with well-defined problems, those with specific goals as well as clear solution path and expected solution, but also with ill-defined problems, those that do not have the characteristics mentioned. That's why the arrows of the model illustrate the need to make changes. So be aware that the writing process has three main components: task environment, writer's long-term memory, and writing processes. And the more you know them, the better you can write. Let's have a quick view to these components. The task environment refers to what is outside of the writer but influences the text. It includes the rhetorical problem and the text that is being developed. Let's have a look at each one of those things. The rhetorical problem comprises things like the given topic, the characteristics of the audience, established rules, and other constraints, especially in academic writing. Let's point out how this component is specifically involved in academic writing. The first element of this component is topic. In academic writing, it is usually given to the writer. For example, write an essay about the effects of, let's see, bisphenol A over human beings. Sometimes, like when writing theses and dissertations, topics are not given, but approved. In either case, they introduce constraints to writing. The main characteristic of topics in academic writing is that they should be clear and well-defined. That implies well-defined problems to write about. However, handling topics may become a muddy field for many graduate students because they fail either to focus on a topic that is clear and well-defined, or to make it meaningful for them so as to create an accurate representation of the writing task, and they are not able to have a clear picture of what their text should look like. The next element is the target audience. Academic writing is created for formal and knowledgeable audiences. That means writers must follow the characteristics of academic writing and show deep and reflective knowledge of the content if they want their text to be effective. The final element of the rhetorical problem is the exigency imposed on the task. Academic writing has exigencies that go from the structure the text should follow to the kind of language that should be used and to the degree of analysis expected. Theses and dissertations are examples of those exigencies. The second component of the task environment refers to the fact that the text that is being written imposes constraints in the additions to it because the new parts must be connected to what has already been written in order to assure coherence and consistency and therefore accurate interpretation. Consequently, it establishes the sequence of ideas that will be written, the connections among them and their foci. That is necessary to communicate messages in a way that avoids misunderstanding, considering that academic texts intend to convince people of the validity and logic of the arguments presented. This certainly means more constraints to work with, but at the same time, the already written text helps writers decide what to read. That is why you have to be aware of connecting the different paragraphs and sections of your text. If you fail to do that, it is perceived as confusing. Writers tend to redefine the task environment in terms that are meaningful for them, but if they do it inaccurately, then their ability to solve the problem, or in fact write a valid and convincing text, is diminished, since the audience may not know the rules the writer follows. In summary, the writer has to address the peculiarities of the task environment. The good news is that all those components can be learned and mastered through reflection and practice. The writer's long-term memory is let's call it the bank, from which writers take out information to create their text. It can be in their minds, but also in outside resources like books, articles, etc., that provide knowledge to write text. In academic writing, that knowledge extends beyond the topic to the target audience and even the writing plans. The knowledge about the topic should be deep, extended, and also reflective. This last characteristic is essential to perform critical analysis that is a main requirement of academic texts. The knowledge about the target audience means to be aware of its needs and degree of knowledge about the topic. You ask questions like, what do the readers want to know? Why? How much new information do they require? The writer needs to take that into account when developing the text. Academic texts express writers' own discovery processes, but they should organize, transform, and reorganize information to meet readers' needs and expectations too. Writers also need to know about writing plans or strategies so they can address the characteristics of the audience and the task environment and also make the writer process easier. One problem with this component is to know how you can retrieve information from the bank. And the key to do that is to find the cue that triggers the recovery process. Another problem is to know how to organize the retrieved information to fulfill the requirements of the rhetorical problem, something that we will discuss later. Again, the good news is that all the elements involved in the writer's long-term memory component can be accessed and learned. And the third component is the writer processes, which are the actual actions a writer needs to perform in order to create a text that can be fully understood. Those processes influence and are influenced by the other two components, and consequently, they are not processes conducted in a linear way, but in a multiple and interconnected one. Let's see how those writing processes are approached in academic writing. Planning is not only the act of figuring out how to go from point A to point B. It is mainly the act of creating an internal and abstract representation of the knowledge that will be used when writing the text. According to the cognitive and learning style of the writer, that representation can be a single word that illustrates a whole set of ideas or an image or another code. That's the cue that I talked about before to retrieve information. Planning has three sub-processes: generating ideas, organizing them, and goal setting. Once again, those sub-processes tend to merge instead of following a compartmentalized flow of doing and finishing process. Generating ideas implies to retrieve information from long-term memory. Sometimes that information is so well defined in memory that the writer can translate it into writing easily, while in other occasions it is so fragmented and unconnected that translating it into writing requires more reflection and searching for information to fill up the gaps. The essence of this sub-process is the creation of ideas to communicate. Organizing ideas is the sub-process that helps the writer give meaning to the developing text. It provides a meaningful structure to the writer's ideas by means of identifying categories, establishing main and subordinate ideas, and connecting them to reflect the mental representation of the knowledge that the writer has. In fact, organizing ideas refer to textual decisions about ordering and presenting the text. However, it's not a simple ordering of ideas, since it is affected by the rhetorical decisions and writer plans to reach the audience and the goals established. The goal-setting sub-process is an important element of writing academic text, since goals are created by writers according to what they want to communicate. These goals are in terms of what writers want and have to say, or what needs to be linked. As they help writers generate ideas, these ideas lead to new and more complex goals, and therefore goal setting is not a sub-process that is done only as a pre-writing activity. In fact, it is linked to the ongoing process of composing the text and has been proved to account for the differences between poor and good writers to a certain extent. The next writing process is translating. It refers to the process of putting ideas into visible language. In other words, the specific action of writing. Translating implies to transfer the representation of knowledge created in planning into actual written words. Such action requires the writer applies all the conventions associated to academic writing and therefore demands knowledge and practice of building sentences and paragraphs. The third writing process is reviewing. It has two sub-processes, evaluating and revising, and like generating ideas, can occur at any moment of the writing process. It is a conscious process that can lead to new cycles of planning and translating. It functions as a quality controller that establishes if the written text satisfies the expectations. And monitoring functions as a writer's strategy that tells the writer when to move from one process to another. It is an executive routine that informs the writer if the text goes as planned, if plans need to be changed and the text rewritten, if a writing strategy is being applied successfully or not, etc. Well, at this stage of this presentation, I can tell you once again that all these writing processes can be learned and mastered. They seem very difficult, but they are not so much. Therefore, academic writing is a cognitive process that resembles problem solving, and that can be mastered providing you the necessary knowledge, something that your university and we at Doctoral Net give you, and you reflect and practice it, something that depends on you. In summary, to be successful in academic writing, you need to approach it as a case of problem solving, which implies analysis of the situation, synthesis of ideas to communicate, and evaluation of arguments with the intention of fulfilling an established goal. Now, you have a better idea of what writing demands from the cognitive point of view. And at the same time, I hope that you have the belief that it's feasible to master the writing process. Complex? Yes, it is. Attainable? Absolutely. Many people do it every day. Why don't you? So it's time to talk about the specific sub-process of planning called organizing ideas. To organize your ideas for writing, there are some actions that you may do, but as we have already seen, first you need to generate those ideas according to the goal you set. Of course, once you begin doing the actions that I'm going to present, it may be necessary to generate more ideas because you may realize that you don't have all the information needed to achieve the goal, or perhaps you have to change the goal. Let's present the actions that will help you organize your ideas before writing. The first action is the definition of the headings and subheadings that you consider necessary to achieve your goal. Headings are like captions that briefly explain the ideas that you think are essential to make readers understand the message you intend to communicate. Subheadings, on the other hand, are the captions that express the evidence and analysis to make the message credible. Headings and subheadings correspond to main and subordinate ideas. The categorization of ideas into main and subordinate is done based on how much those ideas contribute to the achievement of the established goal. The essential ideas become headings, and the ones that express the evidence to support the main ideas and the analysis of the relationship become subheadings. Once you have the headings and subheadings of your text, you list the whole set of ideas that should be discussed under each heading and subheading. Each set of ideas focuses on providing the information needed to achieve the goal established for the heading or subheading. In other words, you list what main ideas are needed in order to develop the heading. And also you list the ideas that are required to provide the evidence or the analysis that supports the claim expressed in the main ideas. For each heading, you need a summary of authors, their ideas, and the evidence provided, so you can write your own main ideas, support them with arguments and facts, and discuss why you believe they are valid or not. If you organize the information of your long-term memory in a tool that lets you not only check it easily, but also know where exactly you can use it, your text will be on the right track for being coherent and consistent. It is advisable to create a table or any other organizing tool in which you summarize the authors, their ideas, the evidence they provide, and even your own comments about of those ideas, because that is the beginning of the critical analysis. You also have to reflect upon what your audience requires to know. What do they need to know in order to fully understand your argument? The answer to this question may imply to generate new ideas and or set new goals. So don't forget the needs and expectation of your audience and put yourself in their shoes. When you have a clear picture of the ideas you want to express and their order and hierarchy, you need an organizing tool that reflects ideas and relationships among them. And an outline is a good example of that kind of tool, but there are others, of course. It lets you present all the headings and subheadings, making clear their order and importance. If you include brief notes to guide your writing, it becomes a very powerful tool to write coherent and consistent academic text. You may improve the organizing tool by including the organizational patterns or methods that you consider useful to make your message clear. For example, are you going to connect ideas using a sequential pattern in which the ideas are discussed chronologically? Are you going to do it following a spatial pattern according to where the elements discussed are? Are you going to use a comparison pattern or perhaps a cause-effect one? If you include this information when organizing your ideas, writing will be easier since you will know how to make the relationships among ideas explicit. You can also include in your organization of ideas the specific tables and figures that you want to use in order to expand and support your arguments. This usually proves to be very useful because you can evaluate how clear they can communicate your message before actually writing, and you can avoid having tables and figures that are useless to achieve your goal. Of course, the writing process is improved even more when you include in your organization of ideas the exact point where you need to perform critical analysis. If you do it, you will have at hand all the information and tools you need to write an academic text that fulfills the expectations of professors, supervisors, and committees. And remember that critical analysis also requires that you organize your ideas in relation to it. As the slide points out, you need to have for each source main ideas, reasons for importance, gaps of information not addressed, links to your study, and where to include the evaluation of the source within your outline or organizing tool. So organizing your ideas helps you focus on writing your text rather than on answer, what next? What can I write now? You will know what to include next. And if monitoring tells you that a problem has emerged, you will be able not only to evaluate and revise it, but also to know if that change implies other changes in the text. So organizing your idea is an important and productive writing process. Practice it and get used to do it, and you will feel and you will see how different you can write your academic papers. And this is the main idea of this webinar. Writing academic text is a complex problem-solving task, but one that can not only be managed, but also mastered. All its components can be learned, reflected upon, and practiced. It's a matter of believing it and doing it. Among the components of academic writing, organizing ideas is an essential one, since it lets you have a guide to translate planning into actual writing. Do not underestimate it, as many people in general do, because the time that you invest in planning, in organizing your ideas, will be the best investment that you can do to be successful when writing academically. This is the reference that I used today about in relation to the model, the cognitive model of writing. And of course, now we are near holidays and especially end of the year. And here you have the things that Dr. Alnett provided with, so you can take advantage of them after, I said, between parties, okay? You go to the party, and then between parties, you can do this. So, my dears, I'm here if you want to ask any question, if you want an explanation. I know that you will need a little time at least to digest all this knowledge. Welcome, Hassan. I didn't say that when I saw you. Crystal, you said, I'm encouraged about developing long-term memory. I am amazed about my professor's ability to recall authors, theories, and main points off the top of their heads. Yes, it is that ability of professors is related to their involvement into the topics and into their field of expertise, okay? So the more you go deeper into what really interests you, the easier is for you to recall authors, ideas, main points, and that kind of things. So all academic things have a component that we usually don't realize or don't want to acknowledge, that you have to work to get knowledge. I mean, you cannot get knowledge without looking for it, without reflecting upon it, without working, okay? It's not something that you can take a pill and then say, oh, now I know this. All that knowledge has to be worked and has to be reflected upon. So when I decided to show you the model of the cognitive processes involved in writing, I did it because I know that most people think that writing is just stay in front of a computer or getting a pen or a pencil and begin to express ideas. That could be true for some types of writing, but not for academic writing. You need to be more organized, more reflective. Crystal says, that's good to know. I really need to start using a spreadsheet to organize my reading. Good idea. One of the goals for break and spring. Good. But remember to go to the park too. So often I find myself too rushed in producing papers to capture the main points in a spreadsheet tool. Yes, and that comes from the idea that preparing your writing, planning your writing, preparing yourself to get the knowledge required to write a paper is a waste of time, because I don't have time. I have to submit this paper. Yeah, but the time that you invest in preparation is the time that you save in rewriting, in doing again. Okay, so the better your input, the better your outcome. That's absolute true. Sorry. So when you don't include or register, let's say register your readings in a place where you can retrieve them, you are wasting your time, because you will have to read them again, will have to look for them again. Crystal says, I capture the points in my paper, but I really need to use a screenshot to refer to again and again. Yes, true, absolutely true. Because you need, that's preparation. That's to put it in a place in which you can easily retrieve them and use them to write, to make critical analysis, to tell other people what you have read. Hassan says, if you don't register your reading, you are wasting your time. Yes, because you have to read them again. Yeah, absolutely. Annalie, Maria, that is very true. Planning is time well spent. Absolutely. Academic writing is not a novel, or that even novels have to be really planned. Don't think that writers don't plan their novels or their short stories. But academic writing requires you to be more organized, more prepared. Annalise says, you were the one who started me planning my writing. I cannot thank you enough. I'm very glad to hear that. Not because I have done it, sorry, but because you got the message that I wanted to communicate to all of you. Okay? Preparation, planning in academic writing is absolutely necessary and is the best investment that you can do. In time, it will save you time, effort, frustrations, and even money sometimes. Any other question? Anything that you want me to explain? Adrian, you are so quiet that I'm worried, my dear. Oh, you consider all this helpful, Krista. Annalise says, next year with my PhD, I will be regular in your webinars again. You will be very welcome, my dear. Okay? The sooner you begin to get used to all these, let's call it habits, the better and the better foundation you will be able to build for the PhD house. Okay? I'm going to stop the recording, but we can continue there. Oh, Kakali, will you please explain a little about creating tables? Well, I talk about tables twice, right? I think, let me go there. Here, I said create tables. That could be any other thing, or it could be a spreadsheet or something like that, to organize the information that you need about authors, their ideas, the evidence that they provide, and your own view about what they have presented, about their claims and the evidence. That's you can do it using a table, but as you can do it using whatever organizing tool you want. What is important, Kakali, is that you have all your ideas, all the author's ideas in somewhere where you can go and retrieve them easily. The other moment that I talked about tables is that instead of writing the text and then look for the tables and the figures that you want to put it into them, why don't you do it just when you are organizing your ideas, when you are putting, okay, I'm going to talk about this heading, and with this heading, I'm going to talk about these subheadings because each one of them give information about the main idea that is expressed in the heading. But why I can use a table which has this and this information? Oh, I remember that I look at the figure, and that figure could be very, very useful for me to show, to illustrate my point better. So I'm going to include under this heading, I'm also going to include this table or this figure. Okay? So, and remember that graphs, tables, and figures and are used to provide more information, not to repeat information. Okay? So some people say something in written text and then include a table which says exactly the same. Now, you need to present graphical information that support, that give more illustration to what you are doing. Okay? All right. Ashut says that this is very informative. I really appreciate that you think that. Adrian says, I use a handy bullet point listing tool called Dynalist to organize and move the head and subheading around. Great. Good suggestion too. Yes, Crystal says that APA manual is very helpful for tables. Yes, because they give you good ideas of what to include in the table and how to format those tables. Kakali says, thank you so much, very helpful. I really appreciate your opinion. Okay, I already answered the Kakali question. Please be aware that in the handouts, under the handouts tab, I put the slides and an exercise for you to about doing these things. Okay. So I created an exercise for you to follow these steps with a topic that you want to write a paper about. Let me finish the recording, stop the recording. Thank you very much for registering for this webinar. See you next year, hopefully.